Next, we don't have Terry, Jeremy at the moment. Right. All good? Order. Bobby Dean to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Weston. It's a pleasure to serve under your chair. I'm grateful to have secured today's debate on NHS capital spending. This is a subject that goes right to the heart of how the NHS functions, and yet isn't discussed enough in this place. I had a look through some of the ministerial statements and questions in preparation for this debate, and I find that we often talk about staffing, specific illnesses, wait times and other operational performance issues. But the simple truth is that all of these challenges are made much more difficult to deal with until we improve the NHS buildings, equipment and technical infrastructure. And I get it, it feels much more impactful and immediate to talk about lifting nurses' pay or commissioning a new medicine. And these things are important. But however arduous the process, or however far beyond our electoral terms the output of capital investment may be, it is vital for the long-term healthcare of our constituents that we fight for these slow returners too.
On that point, will you give way?
Happily give way.
I'm very grateful, and he's starting to make a very compelling point in his speech. In my local area, Stepping Hill Hospital has a reported repairs backlog of £138 million. What this means in practice is that only 4 of the 14 lifts are working. Staff are having to physically take up meals to patients, and those with any sort of mobility issue, family members with a mobility issue, can't visit their relatives on higher floors. Does he agree with me that, yes, we're talking about bricks and mortar and buildings, but we're also talking about people and patients and their quality of life?
I'm grateful for the point my honourable friend has made, and of course, as I get through my speech, I'll come to very similar points about maintenance backlogs and the impact that they're having. I believe it's partly because of the slow payoff of capital investment that we're in the mess we are in now. The last Conservative government completely undermined the NHS's future by over-promising, under-delivering and sacrificing long-term investment to plug holes in their mismanagement of the public finances. While capital underspends being plundered for revenue black holes is not a totally new innovation, it did accelerate under the Conservatives, where the most acute period saw more than £4 billion raided from the capital budget in the 5 years building up to 2019 to cover deficits in day-to-day spending. And I note that this was prior to the pandemic, where of course operational pressures were clearly stress-tested to the limits. And I have no doubt that this underinvestment left us more exposed than we otherwise would have been during this period. And the outfall is staggering. If we had simply matched existing levels of capital spend, more than £30 billion of additional capital would have flowed into the NHS. And instead, we watch buildings decay, equipment age, diagnostics fall behind, and maintenance backlogs soar. I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Medical devices and equipment are increasingly becoming pressure points as trusts are relying on ageing, life-expired kit. Now, my trust, Torbay and South Devon NHS Trust, have had fantastic results in bowel surgery from a free trial of a robotic surgery system that they were offered, but they now can't afford to buy the system because they have to replace other equipment which is on its last legs. So does my honourable friend agree with me that the Minister should set out how the government will ensure that NHS capital policy supports not just buildings and maintenance backlogs, but clinical equipment and the technology needed to deliver safe, high-quality, innovative care for patients?
My honourable friend makes an excellent point. This is not just about buildings, it's about equipment and digital and technical infrastructure as well. Absolutely crucial to getting the NHS to operate in the way it should. And she also highlights how ageing equipment needs to be just upgraded to the very basic level, let alone taking advantage of all the opportunities that new equipment could provide us with if we were able to purchase the very latest in innovations. So I mentioned the maintenance backlogs soaring. They've doubled from around £6 billion in 2015 to over £13 billion in 2024. And I think the critical thing to stress is that it did not have to be this way. The UK has invested around a third less in health capital during the 2010s than other comparable nations. And according to the OECD data, the UK has 10 CT scanners per 1,000 people, compared to an average of nearly 20 per 1,000 across Europe. We have 8.5 MRI scanners per 1,000, compared to an average of 12 per 1,000 across other EU nations. And our bed capacity is pitiful, We operate at around 2.4 per 1,000 people compared to an OECD average of 4.4. And the issue hasn't only been a lack of money, it's also been a lack of certainty and flexibility. The approvals process for capital bids is slow and cumbersome. Even when capital is available, trusts often receive final sign-off so late in the year that they physically cannot begin procurement, get survey work done and start construction in time. And the money therefore goes unspent, not because of poor planning locally, but because the system itself creates delay. And I will give way, thank you.
Thank you very much for giving way. And just on that point there, one of the issues I have in my local authority is that it's currently sat on £50 million of developer funds, which have been paid to the local authority, but those funds aren't being spent in the local community because there isn't the total money needed to be able to invest in health infrastructure, schools and other things. Would he agree with me that this is something that we have to look at to make sure that that money set aside by developers is being spent with urgency in our communities?
Yes, the Honourable Gentleman highlights the complexity in putting together large capital projects. You often don't get funding from one source, it's multiple sources, and therefore everybody providing that capital needs to have greater flexibility in order for the schemes to become deliverable. Otherwise they end up getting clawed back and put elsewhere, as they have been done in the past. The yearly cycle that I speak about is important because in the past, CDL rules, Treasury rules, have meant that any unspent capital must be returned to the Treasury at the year end. It not being able to carry forward punishes good financial management, prevents multi-year planning and leaves trusts scrambling to spend money before deadlines rather than investing it strategically. The result is a system where underspends exist at the same time that there are record levels of urgent capital need. And trusts want to invest and start work, but the system ties their hands. Now, the effect of all this has not been abstract. The buildings maintenance backlog includes high-risk failures, operating theatres closed due to ventilation problems, leaks near electrical systems, sewage failures, and outdated wards where modern clinical standards simply cannot be delivered. And a 2022 BMA survey found that 43% of doctors reported that building conditions negatively impacted patient care.
Will my honourable friend give way on that point?
I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. He's giving a powerful and important speech. Half the residents in North East Hampshire, my constituency, are served by Basingstoke Hospital, which was included in the now infamous 40 new hospitals by 2030 promise. Now it seems completion could be as late as 2046. This delay means another 20 years of spending taxpayers' money on a building with leaking windows, exposed wiring and uninsulated roof and countless other physical problems, and a bill that is going up and up every year to maintain this crumbling building. Does my honourable friend agree that asking taxpayers to pay twice is a waste of public money and Basingstoke Hospital and others should have their rebuilds brought forward?
Hear, hear. I do agree with my honourable friend, and I promise her I will come on to the new hospitals programme as my constituency stands to benefit from it too, if it comes soon enough. And in the meantime, as you say, we are paying twice that sort of premium on paying for all the repairs and patchwork and never keeping up with the investment we need. Ageing diagnostic equipment also means fewer scans, longer waits and more delayed diagnosis. Last year, I had the pleasure of visiting my local hospital's nuclear medicine unit, and they showed me a new machine that was driving down diagnosis times from hours to minutes. And obviously this is a fantastic sign of good capital investment. But when I spoke to the Trust, I was shocked to discover that it's one of the only hospitals in the country with this particular piece of kit. And I just thought to myself, how much more productive the NHS would be if the equipment like this was rolled out routinely across the country as soon as it became available. And then, of course, there's the infamy of poor IT systems. More than 13.5 million clinical working hours are lost every year due to poor IT. And we've all heard those shocking stories of hospitals running on Windows operating systems that we were talking to a paperclip on 20 years ago. And in an age of AI, where AI is promising to sort of transform the workplace, it'd be great if the NHS could just catch up with the last decade or so. And speaking of AI, I did recently meet with an AI developer who thinks they've come up with a solution to the elective surgery booking system. His system auto-calls patients and offers them a choice of appointment, making hundreds of calls in just minutes. And they said that this beats the old system on two counts. The first is usually you receive a date without any choice at all, and it comes by post. But their trial in the Midlands saw that did not attend dropped by 50%, and they put that down to the fact that there was patient choice in the appointment time, and it was guaranteed that it was delivered to them because they picked up the phone and answered it. And again, just think of the potential productivity gains we could make if this sort of technology was picked up at scale. So if I've explained a little bit about the past state of NHS capital spending, it's now to turn to where the government has got to today. And the part of the point of me bringing this debate is to try and find out exactly where the government thinks it is. But it is worth saying that the stated intention of this government has been a step in the right direction. There has been more certainty, more money and more flexibility. And after the initial one-year capital settlement for 25-26, with some assurances that things would continue, the spending review did confirm capital budgets all the way through to 29-30. And these decisions will provide some stability, though it is still uncertain about whether the Treasury core black system remains in place on an annual basis or if it's going to be over the course of that spending review period. In terms of money, there was a substantial uplift in the year one allocations, but it is followed by a relatively flat commitment going forward, albeit, of course, at a higher level than previous due to that initial uplift. And I don't think we should be churlish about this. An increase in investment is inarguably good, but equally we should not kid ourselves that investment is now at the required level. It does not fully address the inadequacy of past investments, nor does it bring it in line with international comparators. And the King's Fund have described this failure to reverse the historic underfunding by the previous Conservative government as extremely disappointing. And the NHS Confederation are asking for the commitment over the spending period to be doubled in real terms, from 3.1 billion to 6.4 billion. There has also been some greater flexibility, with Treasury approval now only required for capital projects in excess of £300 million. This was previously a pitiful £50 million. And this new delegated authority will, of course, cut layers of bureaucracy out and speed up delivery on the ground for ward refurbishments and equipment purchases, though it will not address the issues inherent in the largest NHS capital schemes, which brings me on to the new hospitals programme. Now, this programme was imagined by former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and I say imagined because that was the only place it really existed for some time in his imagination. And emblazoned on Conservative leaflets in my patch was a promise that the money had been secured for a new hospital building and it would be delivered by 2024. And I'm sure the same was true for many in this room. And of course 2024 came and hardly a brick was laid across the country. And when the new government come in, they told us there was never any money allocated for these schemes in the first place. The programme was then reset by the government with an updated timetable and revised waves for projects. And my local hospital's building was put into the second wave, meaning work won't begin until the 2030s. It was a bitter disappointment, and since that announcement delay, things have gone a little quiet overall. And so a year or so on from that announcement, people are now wondering how the programme is getting on. There are rumours that some in the first wave are not keeping pace and could be underspending their allocations already. Mostly this is put down to the adaptation period of the Hospital 2.0 model, an attempt to homogenise design across the country, which is broadly welcome. But any such delays will spark questions about what will happen to that allocated spend. And hospitals like mine will want to be right at the front of the queue for any reallocations if such an opportunity should arise. And I've mentioned my local hospital already, but St Helier Hospital, I don't think there's a case of capital neglect any clearer than the one in my own constituency. St Helier is as old as the NHS itself. It is overcrowded, cramped, and the specialist emergency care functions are simply not up to modern-day clinical standards. And let me be clear, staff at St Helier are working heroically, and patients are safe, but they are doing so in a building that is simply not designed for the 21st century emergency care. Patients are being routinely treated in corridors. Key recommendations for improving service delivery simply cannot be implemented because there is physically not enough space. And despite spending tens of millions on basic repairs in recent years, the building is deteriorating faster than the Trust can fix it. Now, the new hospital programme promised to resolve many of these issues with a new building for emergency and maternity care. But with that delay well into the 2030s, residents in my constituency are left facing another decade of care in a building that is visibly past its lifespan. Yes, I will.
Thank you for giving way once more. I'm based on the outskirts of Nottingham, and already this year we've had 3 critical incidents at Queen's Medical Centre, which is the main hospital in the city. And that has all been based around A&E, and it's exactly the situation he describes. It has capacity for 350 patients, but it has been routinely seeing over 500 at a particular point in time. So would he agree with me that, in addition to the pressures that he describes, there is a reputational risk to the NHS when these types of incidents are being declared because of physical capacity issues?
I agree with the honourable gentleman, and I'm sure, like he hears constituents say that they don't want to attend their local A&E because they don't trust that they'll be seen in time. So I'm sure the figures that he's describing are an undercount of the people that probably should be in there. And like him, he would have been receiving emails about corridor care for some time, and I had hoped that corridor care was sort of this peak crisis moment and that it would subside, but it hasn't. It's become the norm, and that is extremely worrying. It's not acceptable for patients, it's not fair on staff, and it's not a sustainable way to run our NHS. If the government is to reconsider which schemes should be in which waves in the new hospital programme, then let me assure the Minister that my local trust is ready to go. Plans have been drawn up, land is secured, teams can move at pace. We need this, we want this, we are ready. But if that is not possible, but there still remains other pots of capital to be reallocated, then let me make a separate plea. Extend St Heliers Emergency Department now. This is a smaller ask than delivering a whole new building, but it will make a big difference. The only thing more full than the corridors at my local hospital right now is my inbox filling up with constituents describing their traumatic experience. St Heliers Emergency Department sees around 250 patients per day, with routine overcrowding leading to the trust being placed into national oversight measures. And it means my constituent Kirsty was left anxious waiting for her mum of 83 years old to be seen, witnessing elderly patients crying, vomiting, screaming and walking around in severe pain in the corridors. And Mohammed, whose father-in-law waited over 13 hours only to return home without seeing a doctor at all. And others all have shared deeply personal details of their stories with me, and their condition was explained to them alongside countless others in the same corridor. It's undignified, it's unjust, and it's not safe. Now, the Trust have come up with a plan. They believe that they can redesign the existing estate, creating a new urgent treatment centre and expanding the same-day emergency care service, and doing so, they will dramatically increase the number of patients they can see. In the urgent treatment centre, they'll be able to handle up to 30% of patients, up from 14%, and in SDEC, they can get to 20%, up from 8%. And this will prevent unnecessary overnight stays, free up hospital beds, speed up ambulance transfers, and reduce delays of patients needing hospital admission. And it will also address £15 million of the Trust's ageing estates backlog. That plan is immediately deliverable. They believe that work can begin as early as autumn 2026, and it would make an incredible difference. And so I asked the Minister to make use of any influence they have on this matter to help the proposal get over the line. Now, before I conclude, I'd like to raise one further point about NHS capital expenditure that I suspect will not make me popular, but I believe is right, and so I will go on. The government has tentatively re-entered the world of public-private partnership models with its announcement of neighbourhood health centres late last year. Now, we all know how disastrous this model of financing was in the past. The long-term costs to the taxpayer far outweighed the short-term benefits. Britain was among the first in the world to pilot such a scheme, and it failed fast. But it must be said that other nations have learnt the lessons of our failures and successfully delivered social infrastructure at scale, on budget and on time. And indeed, I believe it is one of the reasons that we have fallen behind so badly. And as a Treasury Committee member, I recently guested on a Public Accounts Committee inquiry into PPP. And they concluded that if we get procurement, contract management and the risk allocation of projects right, then we can massively accelerate the delivery of infrastructure in our country in a way that delivers real value for money for the taxpayer. I'm happy to give way.
Thank the honourable member for giving way and congratulate him on the debate. Just on the issue, which if I summarise them correctly, we need to better spend the monies that are currently being deployed in the NHS. Would he agree with me that that has to be the underpinning feature going forward, as more and more money has been poured into the NHS, and we all think it's a fantastic organisation and praise those who work in it, but we need to spend it better and modernise the monolith that is the NHS?
Yeah, I agree with the honourable gentleman, and I believe he's hitting on one of the central points of this debate. We can continue to pour money into the operational side of the NHS, but if we're not getting the capital expenditure right, if we're not improving the equipment, the systems, the buildings, then we're always going to be pouring good money into bad. Just to finish my point about PPP, I know that it is fraught with political risks, particularly for a Labour government who will be scarred by what happened in the past. But I do urge them to look at the report by the NAO, look at the experience of others internationally, and listen to the NHS Confederation, who are now pushing the government to go further and start to experiment on different financial models for delivering this infrastructure we need at scale. So, in conclusion, Mr Weston, NHS capital has been insufficient, uncertain and inflexible for far too long. The new government has good intentions on improving all three, but now is the first moment we can start to look at their delivery. And given what I have outlined today, I would now like to put several questions directly to the Minister. Can the Minister update us on the current level of NHS capital underspend under this government? Where in the system is that underspend occurring and what is being done about it? Will the government allow trusts to carry forward any unspent capital to future years? And would this exist beyond the current spending review period? What assessment has the department made of the new hospital programme delivery? And will any schemes be reconsidered for movement between the waves? And can the Minister outline whether the government plans to reform the capital allocation system to allow multi-year planning and reinvestment of trust surpluses permanently? The NHS cannot function without modern, safe and efficient infrastructure. No government can deliver improvements in performance or productivity without addressing this capital crisis at the heart of our system. I urge the Minister to use this moment to reset the capital regime, put it on a footing that prioritises long-term investment, accelerates delivery and gives patients and staff the facilities they need and deserve.
I remind members that they must bob if they wish to be called in the debate. The question is that this House has considered NHS capital spending. I first call Gareth Thomas, who will be followed by Steve Darling.
Mr Weston, the White House in Harrow, thanks to NHS capital money, will shortly become even more better than its American namesake. But let me first pay tribute to the honourable gentleman opposite for the way in which he introduced the debate, and say that I agree with him very much that the levels of capital investment into the NHS don't get the attention in this place that they deserve. He's certainly right about the impact of austerity under the previous 14 years of Conservative health administrations and the impact that did to NHS capital spending. And he rightly, too, references the shameful spectacle of Conservative Health Secretary after Conservative Health Secretary handing back capital monies to the Treasury at the end of March. My honourable friend will be pleased to know that I have a solution to that particular problem if she's facing that this year. But let me come back to the White House in Harrow, Mr Weston, if I may. Located at Harrow College, close to Harrow on the Hill Station, it is set, thanks to NHS capital, to become one of Harrow's neighbourhood care centres. NHS capital is allowing the local NHS to convert that White House, part of the college at the moment, into a new expanded GP surgery and care centre, offering 2 opportunities for students enrolled at the college to begin a career in health and social care, and crucially creating a hub for care services that can keep people out of hospital and in particular out of accident and emergency queues. The White House is set to be one of a number of new neighbourhood care centres, including a Belmont Health Centre, Alexandra Avenue in Rayners Lane in my constituency, and the Pin Medical Centre in Pinner. This planned expansion of primary care using NHS capital monies over the next 2 years builds on a significant increase recently in GP surgery appointments. The nightmare of having to try and get an appointment to see your GP once lines opened at 8 a.m. is beginning to ease. There is much more progress that still needs to be made, but GP appointments in Harrow have increased substantially since July 2024. Then just under 120,000 appointments took place that month. But by October last year, the total number of appointments each month had risen to over 145,000, a 22% increase. And for face-to-face appointments in particular, there'd been a 30% increase. But I do welcome the difference that NHS capital allocated to Harrow will make for primary care in the coming years. The funding too for GP Direct, currently a surgery based in the West Harrow part of my constituency, to expand and offer more and better primary care services, and for where it will be located at Alexandra Avenue Clinic to become a neighbourhood healthcare centre, is set to make even more of a qualitative difference in terms of primary care services in my constituency. It is, however, at Northwick Park Hospital where I hope to convince the Minister today of the case for further NHS capital investment to be allocated. Waiting lists are beginning to come down at Northwick Park, though again there is much more to do in that regard. To help maintain that progress, Northwick Park needs a new 36-bed critical care unit with the space for further expansion. A series of NHS and independent assessments of critical care across North West London have identified a shortage of critical care beds, particularly on the Northwick Park site. The existing intensive care unit there has a series of problems which compromise the current delivery of critical care. It's not co-located with other key NHS services on site, such as the emergency department or indeed operating theatres. It's outdated, noisy, cramped and unfit for purpose for patients and families facing critical illness or worse, potential end of life. The Trust have put together a proposal for a new UK-leading exemplar intensive care unit that provides additional critical care beds, a new CT scanner, and would embed modern standards of patient experience and family support. The proposal is for a 36-bed unit, allows for a potential future expansion for a further 24 critical care beds. The new unit that is immediately proposed allows for 30 of the 36 beds to replace existing critical care beds that are located in other parts of Northwick Park Hospital, freeing up extra bed space, which in turn will help to alleviate pressures on other parts of the hospital, notably in accident and emergency. It would also play a useful role in helping to prevent the cancellation of elective operations. The recommended bed occupancy for critical care beds is set at 85%, according to NICE. Northwick Park has been consistently above that level for some time. The hospital has one of the busiest A&E departments in the country, receiving an average of 90 ambulances a day, rising to 140 on its busiest days. Critical care admissions too are up over 16% since 2018-19, and over 80% of those admissions to the Trust are again at Northwick Park Hospital. It is worth perhaps reflecting on the experience of COVID, where Northwick Park Hospital was the first hospital during the COVID pandemic to have to declare a critical incident, as the number of intensive care beds simply ran out. An expansion in critical care beds at Northwick Park needs funding. It needs funding to improve services now, but also to have North West London to be better prepared then for future health emergencies. The bid for funding is strongly supported by the Trust Board. I understand too by the local ICB as well. So I do hope my honourable friend and other health colleagues and the Treasury will support it, and that the Minister today will commit to do all she can to give it a very strong push. Lastly, Mr Weston, if I may, I just want to flag that work is also taking place within the North West London Trust, looking at cancer care services. Northwick Park already sees over 50,000 people with suspected cancer each year, and it diagnoses more than 3,000 cases. Too many cancer cases have to be dealt with, though, outside of our area, and the quality of the experience for those being treated for cancer could be significantly improved, again with further investment. I put that on the record, and I hope that my honourable friend will duly make sure that as part of the National Cancer Plan, further investment in Northwick Park is flagged up early as part of that process. Thank you.
Before I call Steve Darling, I would just advise that I'll be expecting speeches probably around 5 minutes if we were to get everyone in, so please be respectful to colleagues. Steve Darling.
Thank you, and what a pleasure it is to serve under you as Chairman, Mr Weston, and may I congratulate my colleague, the member for Carshalton and Wallington, in securing this really important debate. And for me, sorting out the hospital that serves my constituency, Torbay Hospital, but also serves members for South Devon and Newton Abbot, is my #1 priority as the Member of Parliament for Torbay. And I knew that it was in a difficult place before I got elected as the MP for Torbay, but as I began to immerse myself in the challenges facing them, I was shocked. I was shocked by the effective wanton vandalism, the corporate vandalism undertaken by the previous Conservative government of making promises that they just couldn't keep. The vandalism, the fact that they chose not to invest, that made it much harder to invest in the longer term, and that more money and that it was more costly, because it's that old story of a stitch in time saves 9. And now, you know, the fact of the matter is that in Torbay we face some massive challenges. We look at more than 700 sewage leaks at our hospital. These are not just sewage leaks that happen in the corridor, they happen in clinical areas. They infect wards where patients are. Then there has to be deep cleans, delays to patients being going on to lists, and most importantly, delays of supporting those people who need medical interventions. We've also heard from my colleague, the initial speaker, around delays occurring because of poor ventilation and how that impacts on this, and that has impacted very significantly in Torbay Hospital. But you would think, as you approach Torbay Hospital, that there is, call it, the 7th Cavalry over the horizon, because it is wrapped in scaffolding, the tower block, and you think it must be being sorted. But the reality is the £1 million scaffolding is purely there to stop bits of the building falling off and braining staff and members of the public as they go past. And that is not a good way of spending money, of having to spend so much of our NHS money in just maintaining a crumbling building. And I know that the Trust have some money, some bids in with the Minister, who I'm sure that she's considering at the moment, and I hope she'll look at them kindly, around the challenges in the tower block. I'd also, Mr Chairman, reflect on where it works well in Torbay Hospital. I recently visited some really exciting changes where in the ED department there's in millions of investment occurring there, which is really welcome. Operations, daytime operations, where people come in for that short period in hospital, it's an area that is calm and just businesslike. And that's what you want when you visit the hospital. And yet that is very different to other parts of the hospital, particularly those people who suffer from cancer, where the offer is chaotic and all over the estate. And when you're suffering from cancer, you deserve to have a better experience. The endoscopy unit, we've seen investment in there, and we've seen 90% of patients being seen within 5 weeks, and that's a massive improvement. But when you look at the estate of Torbay as a whole, 85% of it is not up to standard, and the £350 million investment only supports half of the hospital. We've also seen a toxic change to the spending power of this capital programme. We've seen Brexit, we've seen the pandemic that's impacted on the spending power of capital programmes, and also the war in Ukraine has seen building prices spiral. And from some of the management of the hospital, they say that since the pandemic, the spending power of capital programmes has halved. So I'd really like to know from the Minister how they've taken account of that money going only half as far as what it has done historically. In conclusion, I'd just like to reflect on how Torbay is one of the most deprived communities in the country, and the NHS often picks up the rough end of this. A director was only recently telling me how she has patients who believe living to your 60s is a good span of life. I'm sure the Minister will join with me in saying that is not the aspiration we should have for our communities. In the South West, we've seen a lack of capital investment, whether it's in our infrastructure in the railways or in our NHS. I hope the Minister will reflect with us of how they're planning to invest in the NHS in the South West, but also, as my colleague who led off the debate on this, what innovation is there to bring forward the investment, because sadly Torbay has been kicked off into the long grass until the mid-2030s. The staff, and most importantly, the most important asset that we have, our staff deserve that investment much sooner. Thank you, Chair.
The next speaker will have 5 minutes, and I'm afraid thereafter I will have to drop it to 4. Gideon Amos.
Thank you, Mr. Weston. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair, and I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Carshalton and Wallington, for securing such an important debate. Number one issue I promised to focus on and prioritise in my election was care in the NHS, specifically Musgrove Park Hospital and the dire state of the maternity unit. Of course, the Conservatives didn't just promise to help, they promised 40 entire new hospitals, including one in Taunton. Someone pointed out, it turned out not to be 40 of them. Many of them weren't hospitals, and they certainly weren't new. Thanks to data from the House of Commons Library, we now see that, as my honourable friend pointed out, a staggering £4.3 billion of NHS capital spending was cut to cover revenue challenges under the last Conservative government. It's hardly surprising this enormous promise turned out to be entirely fictitious. So what's the result? We have 30-degree heat in summer on buildings which are single-storey, built in World War II. We have medical staff fainting in the heat, and in winter we have holes in the walls and rows of buckets in corridors to catch the water. We even have roof guttering now mounted inside the building in several locations to deal with the leaks. I trained as an architect, Mr. Weston. I wasn't expecting to see external roof guttering inside rooms in hospitals. So I do genuinely welcome the government's increased capital spending for the NHS. And last year, as a result of campaigning across parties, and to the government's credit, we saw the government's hospital programme. Taunton Somerset got a glass half full announcement. It was included in the second wave, but unfortunately not until the early 2030s, 2033, which really is later than is needed. We really need things to happen before that, Mr. Weston. So I was delighted to hear the Honourable Member for Ilford North, Secretary of State, on the radio recently, being challenged by the redoubtable Emma Britton, the voice of BBC Somerset, when he said of the new maternity unit, if I can, and I quote, if I can bring forward the timetables of these schemes, because we can get not just the money, but also the contractors and suppliers and everything else that's required, the planning to go with it, we will do, I quote, we will do our best to bring forward schemes. So, Mr. Weston, I'm working closely with the Trust. They have sensible plans that could expedite the proposed project. Getting on with the planning work, that vital planning work we know needs to go so far ahead of these projects. That could be started next year. So I really do ask the Minister if a meeting can be set up at some point to realistically look at the Trust proposals to expedite the vital need for the maternity unit in Musgrove Park Hospital in Taunton. A meeting was proposed early in the year but got postponed. I do understand the pressure the Minister is under. I know she understands the challenges. I know she has many hospitals to think about, but, and I do genuinely appreciate the work that she's doing on this. But given what the Secretary of State told Somerset over the airwaves only a few weeks ago and the dire need at Musgrove Park Hospital, can I urge the government to make a start on this key project as soon as possible? We know that care and our NHS are the key levers to get our public services back where they need to be, help people back to work, boost our economy. We also know it's the right thing to do for mums and medical staff in Taunton and Wellington. Thank you, Mr. West.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. First of all, a real pleasure to serve on your chairship, and a big thank you to the Honourable Member for Carshalton and Wellington for setting the scene incredibly well. I of course want to give a Northern Ireland perspective, but I want to put two things into the process where possible savings could be made, and I'm wondering whether the Minister's had a chance to look at that collectively or individually. Our hospitals, and first of all, the Honourable Gentleman who set the scene had 1,000 petition signatures for this debate, and well done to him in garnishing that interest. Our hospitals are so important, our services are life-saving, so I believe in terms of our finances they are priority number one. Mr Chairman, there's absolutely no secret the NHS capital spending has a direct impact on patient flow and waiting times and staff morale, and also on the quality of care. Each year my colleagues and I listen to the budget and assess how our block grant can benefit the people of Northern Ireland in terms of our healthcare system. And it's so clear that we must invest heavily in our facilities as well as day-to-day spending. I think the Chancellor said yesterday in the spring budget, I think the figure was £380 million coming to Northern Ireland in the block grant, and that should go some way to hopefully helping when it comes to balancing the books. In my constituency of Stratford, around 2 years ago, there was a closure of our minor injuries unit following the opening of an urgent care unit where one of our main hospitals are. In this hospital, the Ulster Hospital, it was one of the most modern acute hospital sites, following over £235 million in capital investment, including the new emergency services facilities, new inpatient accommodation and surgical and research infrastructure. Rather than planning a completely new hospital, the Department of Health has focused on transforming the Ulster into the regional acute hub, and I think that strategy is the right strategy, aligned with wider NHS reconfiguration plans for Northern Ireland. Furthermore, there are also plans for a new maternity hospital at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast, which is one of Northern Ireland's largest capital projects, with over £100 million already invested. Further investment is also planned for the surgical hubs, for the elective facilities and rapid diagnostic centres as well. I'm pleased that, of course, hospitals in Northern Ireland have witnessed increased capital investment, but in comparison to the honourable members who set the scene, Hospital of St Heliers, it is clear some are still struggling drastically, and he has underlined that point incredibly well. And more just needs to be done to ensure they are fit for purpose. Two things on perhaps savings in relation. I know it's two things that I put to the Health Minister back home, Mike Nesbitt, there's a level of middle management which has been created, which is not always necessary. And I'm not saying that people should lose their jobs, but I'm just looking at how it can be done in a good way to ensure its value for money. And the second one is an agency staff. Again, back home, and I understand it's the same over here, sometimes agency staff are employed rather than full-time nurses, and it's never cost effective, because it's better to pay a nurse a good wage than it is to employ agency staff. The two thoughts perhaps maybe that might be helpful. NHS capital spending is not a luxury, it's a necessity. It's a foundation of safe buildings, modern equipment, efficient services and dignified patient care. Without sustained investment, we will continue to see rising waiting lists, staff burnout and the crumbling infrastructure. So again, the Minister is always very responsive, and we're very glad to have her in her place. And I think what the Honourable Gentleman is asking for, and we're all to commit to a sustained strategic capital investment that will secure the future of our NHS and deliver the standard of care that patients and staff both deserve. Those two ideas to save money, I think, are worthy of looking at as well. Thank you very much.
Josh Taylor. Sorry, I've got the wrong. Apologies. Luke Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Weston.
Combination.
What, an MP, Josh Taylor, that'd be a beast, wouldn't it? A pleasure to serve. And I thank my friend, neighbour and colleague, the Honourable Member for Carshalton Wellington, for securing this incredibly important debate. Both he and I have recently written op-ed articles for our local newspaper that we share in recent weeks, describing our constituents' despair at the state of emergency care and facilities at St Helier Hospital. Recently, when I posted my article on Facebook for local residents to read, somebody commented on my post to say that they were fed up of the endless discussions on the topic. And they rightly pointed out that St Helier has been a totemic issue in Sutton for decades. They angrily demanded action and not words from all of us to actually get something done about it. Truth is, I couldn't remotely fault my constituent for their outrage at the imbalance of words and action that they and everybody else in Sutton have had to live with for far too long. Colleagues, this is what happens when government fails to act. People lose faith that the system and their politicians can deliver results. When people hear grand words but see no actions, no wonder politicians are the least trusted profession in the UK. Before I was elected, I was an engineer, one of the most trusted professions. But with the support of more than 16,000 of my constituents, I instantly became a member of one of the least trusted. It's a funny old world, isn't it? When the policy area at hand is something as visceral as whether or not you and your family can go to your local hospital, safe in the knowledge that they are equipped to care for you properly, that loss of faith is absolutely corrosive to all faith in politics. I will.
And the Minister will know the health centre I'm about to mention. It's in East Leek, in my constituency in Mushcliffe. For over 20 years, it has been talked about. There are clinical rooms that are out of action because there hasn't been the appropriate investment. I wonder, would he agree with me, he represents a relatively affluent part of the country, that there is something called building deprivation, where the reality is that health centres aren't in a good enough condition for our constituents, and irrespective of the relative affluence of an area, we still need to invest in our infrastructure.
I couldn't agree more, and it's the condition of an asset that then doesn't attract staff, particularly in more deprived areas. The challenges will be greater, and those compounding challenges, kind of borne out visibly through the physical asset, means that everything just becomes much more difficult. So I completely agree with this point. I shouldn't be here making points about political faith and delivery, nor economic arguments as has been made by others. I will make the important case based on the humane and the experiences of my constituents. I recently did a health survey where residents wrote in and told me their stories, one of which was a woman whose husband spent 54 hours in A&E with sepsis, lying on a trolley in a room so small it could have been a broom cupboard. Another in her late 80s who sat waiting on a chair for 10 hours after a suspected heart attack, and another who, unable to sit in a chair because of her pain, had to lie on the floor, crying, waiting for several hours. Almost half of those who responded to the survey said they waited for more than 4 hours for A&E at St Helier. But we have the NHS numbers too. 18,600 people across the Epsom and St Helier Trust waited for more than 12 hours in 2025. That's sickening. Absolutely the example of a system that isn't working. And sickening is the right word. Like thousands of people across Sutton, I am sick to the back teeth with the endless delays that have got us here. And it's another important angle too, because in almost every one of those stories, I've been told that there's nothing but deep appreciation for the dedicated staff on the estate, many of whom they credit with saving their lives in spite of, not because of, the conditions that they find themselves. So how can we keep on recruiting into or uphold the public image of the NHS if these are the conditions we're expecting staff to work in? This is normally the part of the speech where I talk about the government's awful inheritance from the Conservatives, but I don't feel like making that point anymore. The people of Sutton have had enough context setting, and this government is almost 2 years old now. I will thank the Minister, though, at this point for her discussions on this topic with myself and colleagues. I do feel we are engaging openly and positively, so I want to make that very clear on the record. But I close my speech by just asking the government to listen to our constituents, please, and please do provide that money to expand our emergency department. And at risk of kind of returning to my point about trust, if we don't fix this, we really do risk a catastrophe in Sutton that might undermine my residents' faith and the broader public's faith in the entire model of the NHS. But I will say at the end here, I'm not, and the speech today has been about expanding and refurbishing and fixing St Helier Hospital, but it is a very separate issue for the real and urgent need for the specialist emergency care hospital that our NHS and residents were promised by the last government. So we need that too, and we need it quickly. This expansion to the accident emergency will complement that provision in Sutton, so we need to see that come forward too. Thank you.
I do now call Josh Babarend.
Thank you, Mr Weston. I was half expecting Luke Babarindi, but we got there in the end. And I thank him for calling on me, and I thank my honourable friend, the member for Carshalton and Wallington, for securing this critical debate. And I want to focus my remarks on Eastbourne District General Hospital, where I was born, but also hospital at the core of life in Eastbourne. And I want to start by paying tribute to our amazing staff at that hospital who day in and day out deliver for the people of Eastbourne and beyond. But over the years, we've lost key services at Eastbourne District General Hospital, lost those services to hospitals like the Conquest in Hastings, forcing Eastbourne residents to travel even further for the care that they need. But as well as that, and relevant to this debate, we are losing quality when it comes to the state of our buildings. Indeed, the Trust have said, and I quote, "The age and standard of current hospital buildings presents challenges for the consistent delivery of safe, effective, responsive and efficient care." And the £500 million maintenance backlog bill that the Trust faces is a financial representation of that. Now, we were grateful to hear under the last government, and I'm very sad not to see more representatives of it here today, to see that we were included in the new hospital programme. But of course, we saw nothing happen under the Johnson government. Eastbourne was therefore even more grateful that this government has made a much more serious commitment to include Eastbourne in that new hospital programme and to fund the DGH within it. However, it's of grave concern to us that we are in the last wave of that programme, which means that investment won't land with us until 2037 at the earliest. Meanwhile, many of the fears that we have been worried about in Eastbourne have materialised. On the 6th of January, Eastbourne District General Hospital suffered a power outage which hit many areas of the hospital. Nurses have told me how they were forced to use their iPhone torches to light the way for the several hours that the power cut occurred. Operations were cancelled and our midwifery unit was closed for days because of that outage. And it stems from insufficient power infrastructure that is in need of urgent investment. The very reason, in fact, why Eastbourne District General Hospital was included in the new hospital programme, full stop. Now, I've appealed to the Minister and the Government more widely numerous times to accelerate that investment to Eastbourne and to bring forward our plans. After all, we were ready to go, but we were asked to pause. But if the Government won't do that, will the Minister at least meet with the Trust and I to discuss accelerating the release of the £42 million needed to replace the failing electricity substation that was responsible for this power cut, to ensure that Eastbourne residents get the consistent care and the urgent investment that they need and deserve? I really do appeal, and if I need to, beg the Minister for that meeting so that we can figure out how to unlock this critical investment. Thank you.
Ian Roon.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the Honourable Member for Carshalton and Wallington for bringing forward such an important debate. I would like to start by thanking the Minister for visiting North Devon District Hospital to see the estate for herself and listening to the passionate pleas from clinicians on behalf of the NHS who are serving on the front line. So my own hospital, North Devon District Hospital, is now the third of 9 hospitals in Wave 3 of the new hospital programme and faces a further 10-year wait for the capital funding it needs. That investment is desperately needed to replace an ancient intensive care unit and operating theatres that are nearly 50 years old. I thank the Government for approving Phase 1, new residences for staff and medical students, which will also recover land for the all-important clinical rebuild. However, on paper, Phase 2 is unlikely to begin before 2035. The costs of keeping these facilities running for another 10 years longer will be immense. Our hospital has a maintenance backlog of high and critical grade work of over £40 million. The most per square metre of any hospital in the South West, even higher than many of the hospitals afflicted by RAC. Our NHS Trust worries, as I expect many do in this room, that this is simply throwing good money after bad. In January, the National Audit Office released their update on the new hospital programme, and it makes clear that the current Labour government have tried to financially rescue a programme that the last Conservative government had doomed to disaster. But many of my constituents feel that they have lost out yet again. It is not just that patients in Northern Devon are being asked to wait another 10 years for new critical care facilities, but the ever-increasing maintenance costs of keeping their ageing hospital going will bleed a bigger and bigger share of the NHS funding from their area. Worse still, the Department of Health and Social Care says that hospitals built to the new Hospital 2.0 standard are expected to deliver operational savings. But whose hospitals will really benefit? When I queried this in a written question on the 13th of February, the Minister answered that trusts and integrated care boards manage budgets, and the centralised new hospital programme does not redistribute savings. If your NHS Trust are lucky enough to receive the capital spending for new facilities sooner rather than later, patients in your community will actually benefit twice. If not, tough luck. Furthermore, the estimated cost of this scheme in the new hospital programme seems to bear no relation to the bid originally submitted by the Trust. The government won't answer questions on the MCDA tool used to score the bids for capital funding under the new hospital programme, or even answer freedom of information requests stating the name of the provider who provided the tool, so we are unable to scrutinise this detail as parliamentarians. But I would ask the Minister, firstly, will the Department explain these cost estimates, because £1.5 billion is a vastly inflated figure, far beyond the 50% adjustment stated in the review, which should not be delaying NHS hospitals like mine in North Devon. The Trust is ready to build the next phase now, so if there are any capital available, please bear North Devon in mind. But in addition, what else can the government do in the coming years to avoid entrenching real health inequalities in communities like mine in North Devon? Thank you.
Lib Dem spokesperson, Clive Jones.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Mr Weston, and I thank my honourable friend, the member for Carshalton and Wallington, for securing this extremely important debate. Make no mistake, what we are talking about is a national scandal. Many parts of our hospitals are falling to pieces. That's not just political rhetoric, but a genuine risk. Some of my own constituents, for example, use Frimley Park Hospital, primarily built out of RAC, and already almost twice as old as it was designed to last. In January, the National Audit Office reported that this most urgent RAC-related phase of the new hospital building programme would be completed at least 2 years later than originally planned, and possibly longer, despite the pressing safety risks posed by the buildings. We need to be doing better. And my honourable friend has also spoken eloquently about the challenges with the capacity at his local hospital, St Helier. Hospitals like his are suffering from the Conservatives' years of underinvestment and neglect. It is a story repeated across the country. Crumbling buildings, leaky roofs, in some cases sewage leaks, and equipment faults that delay diagnosis and care. This didn't happen in just the last 2 years, and I hope the opposition spokesperson will show some contrition for the Conservatives' part in the lack of capital investment over many years that allowed those conditions to develop. The promises made by the Conservatives for 40 new hospitals with nothing at all behind the promise will not be forgotten for generations. But Labour is not meeting this crisis with the urgency that it demands. Their response has been to delay the new hospital building programme even further. The decision is a staggering miscalculation. It will cost the country billions to keep old, dying hospitals on life support, around 400 million in the case of the Royal Berkshire Hospital alone. At this point, I draw members' attention to my register of interest as the governor of that hospital, and a family member works in the hospital as well. The Royal Berkshire staff are hard-working, compassionate people, as are the doctors, nurses and the other clinical professions working across the country. Our NHS staff are truly the best of us. The conditions they work in are, despite the best efforts of the Hospital Trust, very poor. The building, parts of it almost 200 years old, is quite literally sinking. Cancer patients receive chemotherapy in the children's ward from 1910. Wards and offices are inadequately ventilated. Parts of the hospital are poorly accessible, and 50 operations were cancelled in 18 months. Not because of staff availability or incompetence or for medical reasons, but because the building was simply inadequate on the day. Labour's response has been to make that hospital struggle on for at least another 7 years, on top of the Conservatives' already lengthy delay, at huge cost to both the taxpayer and patient dignity. It is not a problem confined to the Royal Berkshire Hospital. Between 2019 and April 2025, there were at least 5,000 cancellation incidents caused by crumbling infrastructure at our hospitals. These incidents are only recorded where the care of at least 5 patients is affected. So that is a minimum of 26,000 people who have had vital care delayed or cancelled simply because the hospital wasn't in an acceptable condition. And once you consider the incidents affecting fewer than 5 patients, the actual number may well be much higher. We must not forget those hospitals that are not part of the new hospital building programme. Yesterday, my staff spoke to an NHS consultant working in accident and emergency at such a hospital. They have asked not to be named. The consultant described an incident this very week where family members had to be moved out of the resuscitation relatives room at the hospital because raw sewage was flowing through the room. Simply imagine that. Your loved one, critically unwell, in resuscitation, your whole world being turned upside down, and in that moment you are hurried away from a stream of vile effluent. It's a national disgrace that this is the reality of our NHS today. This happened just this week. There is no new hospital coming for those patients or that consultant. The government must today commit the money needed to maintain our entire hospital estate properly. Care, of course, starts in the community before a patient ever reaches a hospital. But we all hear from our constituents that our primary care system is also not coping due to underinvestment. In my constituency, we have seen thousands of new homes built in the last 10 years, but no new GP practice to serve those thousands of new residents. I know many members will recognise that problem in their constituencies as well. The investment in facilities is not just keeping up with reality on the ground. It's why I'm fighting for a new GP practice at Arborfield Green, although the sad reality is the lack of capital investment in this infrastructure, as well as incredibly complex commissioning rules, stand in the way. I hope the Minister will have something to say about investing in primary care as well as hospitals. Let's not forget the outdated equipment currently in use in our NHS. Data uncovered by the Liberal Democrats has revealed that 80% of hospitals are using outdated X-ray, MRI or radiotherapy equipment. Imaging is critical for the diagnosis of so many medical conditions, and NHS England themselves say that CT, MRI and X-ray machines need to be replaced every 10 years in order to be reliable. But 38 out of 48 trusts that responded to the request for information reported having X-ray machines in active use over that age. 21 of them were using MRI machines older than 10 years old. Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital Trust reported a X-ray machine which was 30 years old, older than some members of this House. It should be a national scandal that the life-saving diagnoses are being left to equipment that we cannot safely rely on. Patients are at risk and staff pushed to breaking point. At this moment, I'd like to recognise the hard work of my honourable friend, the member for Westmoreland and Lonsdale, on radiotherapy. Like him, I was disappointed to see that the National Cancer Plan was not more ambitious in its investment in radiotherapy. Anybody who stops to talk to him about this issue will hear about the outdated radiotherapy units are being pushed well beyond their life across this country. We must do better than that for our cancer patients. The National Cancer Plan, which I called for in this room some 16 months ago, was a welcome step from this government. But on radiotherapy investment, just like the new hospital programme, Labour has not met the moment. At this point, I'd like to pay tribute to Ashley Dalton, who was the minister who actually made the National Cancer Plan happen. And I'm really sorry that she has decided that she needs to stand down from her post. She did a really, really good job. Liberal Democrats would implement a 10-year capital investment programme that allows the NHS to plan for its future, not just its next budget cycle. This would include £10 billion to end the scandal of crumbling hospitals and GP practices, improving outcomes for patients and cutting daily costs for our National Health Service. We would establish a winter task force with a ring-fenced £1.5 billion fund to deal with winter pressures, ending the cycle of raiding the capital budget just to cope with the latest predictable emergency. And we have on many occasions said how this will be paid for. The question before the Minister today is not whether something needs to be done. We all know what needs to be done. Investment on a huge scale. The question is, when will the government deliver this? Thank you.
Opposition spokesperson, Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Weston. And can I too associate my comments about the Minister, Ashley Dalton, for her stepping down? She was a formidable opponent, will be sorely missed, so I'm sad to see her step back, but she's made the right decision for her, which we should all do in this place. Can I thank the member for Castleton and Wallington for bringing this forward. He is absolutely spot on when he says we don't scrutinise the process nearly enough when we look at NHS capital spending. I was taken by what he said on that point. What I was less surprised about is there weren't many solutions coming forward, which is the key of having this debate, because this is hugely technical. And Chair, if it's okay with you, I would like to use an example from my constituency of both the pros and the cons, the good stories and the bad stories when it comes to capital investment. So I was elected in 2019, and Hinckley is my biggest town. Healthcare is an important priority for them, and talk of having hospitals improved there has been ongoing for 30 years. Now, for the good side, we were lucky enough to be picked to have a community diagnostics centre, and that was a £24 million investment, which I was lucky enough to open back last year. And that shows just what good can come out of it. And under the last government, when it came to August 2024, there were 165 similar good news stories of community diagnostic centres being opened across the country. That's not to mention the 108 surgical hubs as well, which haven't been mentioned here, which are increasing patients' abilities to be seen and treated quickly, helping to deal with the waiting lists. But I come with a negative story as well, related to the same hospital, because unfortunately we were looking for a second project, a £10 million day case investment. But unfortunately, despite there being secured funding, delays in the system, difficulties in changing need have meant that that has been cancelled. And if I look at the NHS papers themselves, specifically around that case, it states the SDP capital business case for Hinckley Day Case Unit received national approval in March 2024. But then they struggled because it goes on to say, since the business case was approved, there have been further key changes. Changing financial context nationally and local financial challenges, increased capital costs to the scheme, circa 2 million compared to the approved by the board, and programme delays resulting in significant reduced capital resource. It goes on to explain what these delays were, stating further delays to the programme occurred due to cost pressures that exceeded the SDP capital allocation, But since the approval of the capital business case in 2024, delays can be attributed to the planning application phasing, considering the contention surrounding the demolition of the Hinckley District Hospital, and the delay in submitting planning application to allow the development of a robust design to address the local planning authority's concerns. So you can already see there's difficulties in the way in which need is being allocated across Leicestershire. You can see how planning interferes. You can see how inflation interferes. And this is the process issue that's at the heart of making these capital decisions. So that leads us into the bigger picture of where we're in front of the government here today. Because, of course, as has been mentioned, funding is really, really important. So what's the best document we can look at to try and see what the government is trying to do? Well, the 10-year plan is clear on what it sets out. It says, I quote, "We will continue to use private providers to improve access and reduce waiting times, to return the NHS to its constitutional standards. As we outlined in our plan for change, we will not let any spare capacity go to waste on ideological grounds. We will continue to make use of the private sector capacity to treat NHS patients where it's available, and we will enter into discussions with private providers to expand the NHS provision in the most disadvantaged areas." We agree with that on this side, but I'm not sure all members on the other side will agree with that proposition. So I'd be interested to know if the Minister has all her members on her side aligned with this, because something I do agree with the concerns raised forward is the last government did bring forward PFIs, which brought in £13 billion worth of investment for new hospitals. But it cost the taxpayer over £80 billion in repayments, and we're still paying for that now. And if we turn back to the NHS 10-year plan on a section called Harnessing New Investment, it states, "We learned from previous experience of the private financial initiatives. In other cases, however, PFI was a costly mistake which represented poor value for money. Contracts were too complex and lacked proper transparency. As the government considers new sources and models of private investment, we do so with that experience in mind." Well, how do we know this, Minister? Where is it set out that the government has learnt this time? Because on the same section, the government tells us it will, quote, "evolve its infrastructure financial models, and it will consider new public-private partnerships where the revenue stream, where appropriate risk transfer can be achieved, and where value for money for taxpayer can be secured." Those aren't small tests. They're the fundamental ones we need to make sure they are in place. So my simple question is to the Minister, what's different this time? How will we assure value for money, and who will make that decision? And when it comes to genuine risk transfer being assessed, rather than simply pricing it into decades into payments, what will we see and how will this work? The 10-year plan also states we will co-develop this with the National Infrastructure and Service Transformation Authority, building on the successful NHS Local Improvement Financial Trust LIFT programme, and look to drive competition in the market to incentivise others, including third-party developers, to improve their offer to deliver better services at lower cost to the taxpayer. Great, but when it's commenting on LIFT is only used for small practices. So what model is coming forward for everything else? The plan states we will engage with the market on this programme and support NISTA in the wider market testing of a new PPP model. Well, Minister, what is that model? Can we see it? What does it look like? Because I note from her written questions, when it comes to neighbourhood health centres, we're told that there's 120 centres will be operated by 2030. 70 will be new buildings, 50 will come from refurbishment, and of those, 80% will be funded through PPPs. But there are no plans to publish the business case. That raises legitimate questions. Why? Why is the government hiding this? And when we've talked about being here before, when the country is nervous about this, why can't we see what is being brought forward? If a new model is genuinely different, transparency shouldn't be a threat, it should be a strength. Why won't we see it in Parliament and to the public?
Just on that point, on transparency, I think it'd be remiss not to ask at this point. The right honourable gentleman is speaking about transparency and about funding for hospital projects. We all remember the imagined 40 new hospitals from the previous government. Can I invite him to give a bit of transparency as to where the money was supposed to come from to fund those hospitals' programmes, and ultimately where it disappeared to, because my residents are still suffering from the impact of his government not providing that money. If he can just expand a little bit on what happened to that money that never actually arrived.
I'm very grateful for that chance to put this on the record. If you'd like to turn to the Health Infrastructure Plan 2019, that had the 3.7 billion, which was the seed funding to look into the projects to bring things forward. Also dealt with the first wave of the 3 hospitals that were being brought forward to allow the second and third wave to come on from there. He will also know, as has been stated by this government and our side, that in any big national infrastructure, it's done through a series of spending reviews. So the money was committed for the 20 billion through those stages on the basis of that plan. Now, we have the same argument thrown back at us this time from the government when it's convenient for them to say we're not increasing defence spending because it needs to come in a spending review. So both sides are playing politics here where there was money allocated in that plan. So I'm direct him. I appreciate he may not have been in Parliament at that time, but it would be something to ask the House of Commons Library to have a look at, to understand. He could then pass that on to his constituents to answer that question. If we've got a new model, then we need to make sure that we in this House can scrutinise it. But there is a concern coming forward as well. GPs, when it comes to their rents and rates, are reimbursed. But there is concern coming forward that if we have further PPPs similar to the previous PFIs, are they going to be on the handle for ongoing premises costs and responsible for doing that? We must have crystal clear guarantees for them to understand what they are accountable for and not. Finally, for patients and staff alike, if we turn to the 10-year plan again, it states, we will also work with NISTA to consider the opportunities for health that could be achieved through private financing of revenue-raising assets, such as key worker accommodation and car parks. Now, that will set alarm bells running if the government is looking at possibly using either the key workers or staff or patients coming into car parks to create funds. I'd be grateful for clarity on the government on what it is actually meaning by that statement, because already this is a contentious issue. People know we need to have funding coming into the health service, but where those streams come from and what they look like, if the 10-year plan is looking at revenue-raising assets, I'd be keen on this side of the House to understand exactly what that looks like. So overall, we have a desire in the 10-year plan that's shared across this House to improve healthcare. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. What this debate is about, and what the criticism of the 10-year plan is there's no delivery chapter. And I'm grateful for the member from the backbenchers bringing this forward so that this side of the House can ask those questions about what delivery will actually look like when it comes to improving the health of the nation.
Minister, Karen.
Thank you, Mr Weston. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this morning. Can I first of all thank colleagues for their kind remarks about my colleague, the member for West Lancashire. We will miss her. I think she's done a great example, not only by continuing whilst undergoing cancer treatment, but also, as members have said, by taking that power to recognise that sometimes you do need to look after yourself and prioritise your constituents. And no doubt she will be doing that very well. I'm looking forward to her contributions from the backbenches. I can't tell you how much I am looking forward to that. And can I really congratulate the Honourable Member for Carshalton and Wallington for securing this important timely debate. I hope when he was perusing previous debates in this thing, my name came up occasionally, because I am one of the few members of Parliament over the last 10 years who, as I said, banged on quite a lot about capital. So absolutely delighted to be the member, because it is absolutely crucial. And the sound management of that capital is absolutely a crucial resource to the provision of healthcare for all our constituents. And I agree, it doesn't get enough airtime, and I think he made an excellent speech and contribution actually outlining most of the issues. And we've had a lot today. I'll try and do justice to a very wide-ranging debate. But I'm going to remind ourselves of the problem here. And my old friend, I brought Lord Darcy's report. It has been mentioned, but as he said, the NHS has been starved of capital, and the capital budget was repeatedly raided to plug holes in day-to-day spending. £4.3 billion lost in that way between 2014 and 2019. Crumbling buildings, services disrupted at 13 hospitals a day in 2022-23, and a backlog maintenance of more than £11 billion. And the NHS, as he described, in the foothills of the digital transformation that the rest of the country, indeed the rest of the world, was undergoing. Plus, the shortfall in capital investment. And I kind of admire the spokesperson for the Conservative Party opposite in his defence of that situation. It's a tough gig to do, and I think we can all see what happened in our constituencies. And I'm very proud of the investment in capital under the last Labour government, and I'll come back to PFI in a moment. Reversing this trend and repairing and rebuilding our healthcare estate is an absolutely vital ambition of our ambition to create an NHS fit for the future. And that is why we are prioritising the estate to support the task. First of all, prioritising core and safety, technology, equipment, changing the rules on capital. That's a really important measure that the Chancellor made to stop that capital revenue transfer, incentivising the system, streamlining the processes. The Honourable Gentleman tells us how terrible the processes were. They were in government. We have taken control. We have used government for good effect to start streamlining those processes. Part of that is about the movement towards making one team within NHS England Department of Health. I hope honourable members will support us in that. Building the capacity and the capability of the staff in order to develop and do the work that we need them to do, because that has been completely depleted over the last 14 years. We've put a lot of information into the system to move this and to move it quickly. I think we are all seeing the benefits of that in our constituency, and we will be bringing forward a capital plan in the spring to outline that and make all of that clearer, I think, both for the system and for honourable members. The charts, very briefly, for giving way, and she's making an important point about the absolute vital need for capital funding in the NHS, and particularly for myself and a number of my honourable colleagues here, because we have a hospital, St Helier, that's obviously falling apart, and unfortunately patients are being affected, and we know that unfortunately the hospital programme has been delayed another 3 years. And I know there's been lots of goodwill here, and we're really looking for additional investment in the A&E, and I really hope that the Minister will take that away, and it might be something that might be forthcoming in the statement soon. Thank you. The Chancellor has made her key decision to put us back on track, announcing in the budget previously capital health spending increasing by 15.2 billion by the end of the spending review in 2029-30. This funding will be used as intended. In previous years, as we've heard, the capital funding was diverted to cover those day-to-day costs. We have tightened those Treasury rules. We have changed them. That's what government can do. Who knew? And as a result of that, capital funding will now be fully focused on repairing, upgrading and expanding NHS buildings and facilities to support long-term productivity. This settlement represents record levels of capital investment into healthcare, and it will support the 3 shifts set out in the 10-year health plan, moving care out of hospitals into the community, replacing outdated systems with modern digital services, and focusing on treating illness, preventing illness rather than just treating it. Of course, rebuilding NHS infrastructure cannot happen overnight, and I can assure honourable members here today the government does understand that long-term certainty over capital funding is needed for the NHS to move from these short-term fixes to more strategic investment. And that's another key decision made by the Chancellor. That's why we've delivered a 4-year capital health settlement extending to 2029-30 through the 2025 spending review, backed by a further 5 years of certainty for estates maintenance and funding. And I'm genuinely grateful to honourable members for recognising that that is an absolutely massive change for the system that we have engineered into it. And I think we are all seeing the benefit of that. It does mean £30 billion commitment in capital funding over 5 years to support the day-to-day maintenance and repair of the estate, with a further 5 years of funding certainty as set out in the 10-year plan. For the first time, NHS trusts have also been given multi-year operational capital allocations with clear funding set out to 2029-30 and indicative funding for a further 5 years. This is an unprecedented opportunity for local health systems to plan with confidence over a 9-year period, and I continue to encourage all members to engage with their ICBs who will be prioritising these schemes over that period. Within the £30 billion, the Estate Safety Fund will continue, providing £6.75 billion investment over the next 9 years to target the most critical building repairs, alongside £2 billion to continue supporting NHS England's National RAC programme across the spending review. Additionally, £21 billion in operational capital over the 5-year spending review will empower NHS organisations to invest in local priorities, including hospital infrastructure. It will take time, Building up the capacity as well as the capability will take that time, but this does mark the beginning of our rebuilding that NHS fit for the future. Now, I would also like to assure members here that this government recognises the pressures faced across the system and bringing back performance standards to what patients expect. And that is why we're investing to expand hospital and emergency care capacity, helping to reduce waiting time and improve care for patients. So over the next 4 years, there is the 1.9 billion for urgent emergency care to support A&E departments and support ambulance services in reducing handover times. 1.5 billion for diagnostics, including funding to expand and build on the hours of particularly community diagnostic centres to shift care from hospital to the community. The Honourable Gentleman noted that they were started under the last government, of course, but we have made sure that they have expanded times, expanded hours, that there are more of them. And crucially, they're not built as add-ons, but they are fundamental to the pathways experienced by patients in this system and make sure that we have good value for taxpayers' money. 473 million for mental health services, including for people with learning disabilities and autism. I think we'd all agree that the mental health estate also needs recognition here. Over 280 million for community care, supporting services closer to home, and over 139 million for electives across the next 2 years. Moving away from paper-based systems and towards a modern digital services, the autumn budget confirmed 300 million capital investment in technology, building on the combined revenue and capital investment of up to 10 billion by 2028-29 announced at the spending review. We are transforming healthcare by shifting care out of hospitals and into the community, and over the next 4 years we are investing more than 400 million into upgrade primary care buildings and deliver neighbourhood health centres as part of our commitment to those 250 neighbourhood health centres through the rebuild programme. I'm going to just finish these points, if I may, and answer some of those issues. The first 120 neighbourhood health centres will be operational by 2030 and will, as we've heard, be delivered through a mixture of public and private partnerships. And I thank the Honourable Member for Carshalton and Wallington by being one of the few who have acknowledged that this is difficult. There's some controversy around that, but I'm a very strong supporter of the previous LIFT schemes. And I'm a very strong supporter of my own scheme, Southmead Hospital, which is one of the better PFI schemes that delivered unprecedented levels of care, including to myself, for the people of Bristol. It is important that we learn the lessons of the past, and we absolutely have, including the NAO report, and absolutely working with NISTA, as has been outlined, we will continue to pursue that and bring forward those cases. I don't want to re-rehearse the lack of funding, really, for the new hospital programme. I'm not going to give way on this. I'm going to get through my final comments. We did put it on a sustainable footing. I do understand for local people across the country in different areas, they have been led up a garden path, frankly, and told something was going to happen, and the money was not there. I think we all recognise that. It wasn't on that sustainable footing, but we have done that. We have backed it with the appropriate investment, rising to £15 billion over each consecutive 5-year wave from 2020-30, averaging £3 billion a year. The exact profiles of funding will be confirmed at future spending reviews, and of course it is weighted in order to make sure that we recognise at the time that schemes come on profiled most are absolutely caught up in that. We're progressing wave 1, and I will continue to liaise with honourable members about the progress. My message every week to any NHS trust, any Member of Parliament, to NHS England, to the team running the new hospital programme is we need to deliver them. There is a large queue behind these hospitals. We've heard about some of those again today, Mr Weston, and there is also a number of colleagues who don't have a hospital being progressed in this scheme. I understand that, and the government wants to build these. We are very keen to get on, and as honourable members have said, a lot of this is about trust and commitment. So I want members here to be very clear, and anyone paying attention, that I am very clear. It is important that we get on with this programme, that we deliver on the ground, and we make sure that it is robust. Finally, alongside increased capital funding, we are improving how that funding was measured. as we've heard, the old processes did not work. Local schemes going to an ICB, to the region, to NHS England, to the department, to the Treasury and back again. Huge amounts of sign-off, no control, no accountability, and no one locally understood what was happening. We are transforming that. We are bringing together the team. We are streamlining that process, making sure it is, of course, well governed. And that will make sure that things are happening quickly. And we are already seeing that, so that the overspends, underspends this year, we've got money out, we've got them into schemes that are already into the system, we've improved getting more DEXA scanners. That is how we make sure that this actually happens on the ground. It is up to ICBs to prioritise proposals. We are working more closely with them to support them to bring things forward. And I really do urge all members who have spoken today, my friend from Harrow West, from Torbay, from Rushcliffe, Taunton and Wellington, Sutton and Cheam, Eastbourne, North Devon on particular schemes, keep working with your local system. But I'm very happy to keep talking to people. To the member for Taunton Wellington, I have met with NHS England about that proposal, looking at maternity in the area. I know it's a huge concern. I'm very happy to meet with him. I will get back to the member for North Devon about some of those numbers that he's outlined. They are not familiar to me, but to the other point that was made, we are making sure that we are building in contingency for the future, because we also know we live in volatile times. Thank you very much.